Let's cover another Tubi original. All Tubi movies need to labeled as comedy because they all comedically bad. A woman named Mary secretly lives in the Bordeaux Manor, her old foster family's house in Pasadena that has been vacant for 10 years. When she was young, she lived with the prestigious Bordeaux family, County Commissioner James and his wife Barbara, and their children Michael and Charlotte. She has been continuously haunted by the good and bad memories she has with them, especially how much her parents loved her parents' untimely death because of a car accident, and how Michael was always fighting with Charlotte. She remembers making a pact with a girl, saying sisters forever. Mary heads to the kitchen to prepare her tea. As she reads an online article about Michael being awarded the Bordeaux Manor, a real estate broker named Amy enters the house. She roams around and is creeped out upon seeing Mary's tea. Amy nopes the F out of there, but unbeknownst to her, Mary has armed herself with a knife, ready to attack in case she's found. Oh, this girl a squatter. Practicing the art of hobosexuality? Michael's lawyers, Rick and Steve, inform Michael that he has won the probate after his parents' deaths without a will and Charlotte's disappearance. A relieved Michael informs them that he's selling the manor. All these three men are full-on AF. They can spit roast me. After the meeting, Rick invites Steve to go on a double date with him and his wife Julia, and Steve decides to invite the new girl he met. Steve can really get it. Meanwhile, Mary starts tailing Michael the moment he leaves the law firm. She then gets a call from Steve, inviting her as his date to the dinner. Because of this, she loses Michael. Mary has been assuming Charlotte's identity and uses the name Charlotte and the nickname Lottie. Later at the restaurant, Lottie tells Rick and Julia that she just got back from Bali and is just staying in Pasadena for a few days. Lottie assumes that Julia and Rick have lost all spark, but Rick iterates that they still got it. Julia over here looking like she could get dicked down harder though. They talk about the Bordeaux Manor and Julia tells Rick that they should buy it because it'll be a perfect place to expand her studio and make a family, calling it their missing piece. Because of this, Lottie remembers James and Barbara welcoming her to their family and calling her their missing piece. When Steve's Uber arrives, Lottie decides to stay. After Steve leaves, Lottie shares that she just graduated from art school months ago and is currently working on her portfolio. When Julia says she dreams of creating art in Bali, Rick shares that Julia is an artist too. Lottie seduces them by eating a cherry, and for some reason it makes the couple hot and sweaty. The trio heads to the couple's house. Damn, these three finna make a sandwich. While Rick prepares drinks, Julia shows Lottie her home studio. When Lottie finds Julia's nude painting, she assumes that Julia desires to be with a woman, prompting Julia to share that she and Rick have discussed it out of curiosity since they married young, and the two been itching to eat salads together. After Lottie tells her that they just have to find someone they can trust, she comes on to Julia, who kisses her back. When Rick arrives, Julia pulls away and apologizes, but Lottie initiates a three-bean salad tossing. She even grabs some paint and spills it on Julia, creating a P. Diddy baby oil situation. The next morning, upon waking up, Rick tells Julia that although he doesn't regret the threesome, he doesn't want to do it again because he's happy with just the two of them, to which Julia agrees. When they head to the kitchen, they're shocked to find Lottie cooking breakfast. They nicely kick the stranger out the house and she still seductively eats the fruit because, why not? Before Lottie leaves, she accepts the business card of Julia, who tells her that the Mariposa Gallery at the Arts District has some great programs for recent grads, and she's free to drop her name if she goes there. Lottie returns to the manor as a potential buyer and meets with Amy, who shows her around. When Michael arrives, Amy goes to talk to him while Lottie hides. Lottie remembers some past trauma of a young Michael threatening her just for going into his room. Upon hearing a noise due to Lottie leaving through the back door, Michael and Amy check it out, and they see a doorknob on the floor. After Amy assures him that she'll have it fixed, Michael sees a screwdriver under a piece of furniture. One time after the young Michael and Charlotte fought, Mary comforted Charlotte, assuring her that she believed her, even if her parents didn't. Mary and Charlotte then promised to have each other's backs. Mary showed Charlotte a bottle of pills she stole from her last foster home and told her that it knocked out her foster parent for days at a time, so if Michael takes it, he won't bother her that night. Meanwhile, Julia tells Rick that she has just booked their trip to Bali and that she is thinking of hosting a nude art class, which Rick really likes for some reason. The next day, representatives from WXLE News arrive at the manor to make a piece about it for the evening news to help sell it faster. Lottie, who's in her childhood room, looks out the window and watches them. At the office, Steve tells Rick that Lottie has ghosted him. "Steve, you can call me instead." Rick tells him that she's probably no longer in town, But in reality, Rick really just dicked her down too good. Lottie goes to the Mariposa Gallery and sees the posters for the nude sketching workshop and the call for a nude model volunteer. On the day of the workshop, Julia is surprised that the model is Lottie, since she thought she had already left town. As the workshop attendees sketch Lottie, Lottie gives Julia flirty glances, which Julia tries to ignore, but her kitty is purring. When the workshop wraps up, Lottie tries to get Julia's attention for the last time before leaving. Later, Lottie returns to the studio with Pad Thai and initiates talking about their little adventure. When Julia shares that the experience reignited her marriage, Lottie shares that her parents were madly in love with each other too, but they've unfortunately died in a car accident. She adds that the cops said that James had drugs in his system that caused him to fall asleep while driving, but James wasn't a druggie. With tears in her eyes, Lottie tells Julia that it was an accident as it was not meant for him, so we assume she tried to drug Michael all because Michael yells at her. When Julia asks what she means, Lottie clarifies that tragedies should be reserved for people who deserve it and says that she's been running away from her problems ever since, but she's now ready to build real relationships again thanks to her and Rick. Lottie and Julia then scissor each other and eat a lot of roast beef. When Julia gets home, she tells Rick, who's watching TV, that class ran late and excuses herself to get snacks. Rick sees the feature about the manor, where the reporter says that Charlotte disappeared just before she came of age. When he goes to check on Julia, he learns that she's taking a shower, wiping the fishy smell off her. Meanwhile, at the manor, Lottie recalls the time she learned about Charlotte's disappearance. She was no longer living with the Bordeaux family, yet she was so sure that Michael killed her. Unbeknownst to Lottie, Michael is outside and he can see that her room light is on. At the law office, Rick is surprised to learn that his colleague Andrea has hired Lottie to be his new assistant. Can someone tell me how these Tubi people somehow get new social security numbers to match their fake identities? Lottie tells him that she has decided to stay because LA has a booming art scene and working at their firm provides her a stable income to pursue her art career. When Lottie goes to her desk, Rick calls Julia to inform her about Lottie, and Julia reveals that Lottie showed up at her workshop. This upsets Rick because she didn't immediately tell him. Both Julia and Rick start feeling like there's something wrong with Lottie since she's suddenly involving herself in their world. Later, Steve sees Lottie and Rick warns him to ignore her and stay away from her. Steve wonders if the black woman is even qualified for the job, which for once is a valid question because how this art student working in a law firm? Later that night, Lottie is puzzled after seeing that the manor's lights are on. She is then horrified to see Michael, who has been waiting for her and has discovered that she has been posing as Charlotte. Lottie confronts Michael about killing Charlotte, which Michael denies, saying he'd never hurt his sister. He adds that she was the one who turned Charlotte against him, so if Charlotte is dead, then it's her fault because she pushed her over the edge. Michael asks Mary to leave because the house already has a buyer. Refusing to let go of the house as she believes that it's where she belongs, somehow Lottie throws Michael over the railings of the second floor, resulting in his death. The next day, Amy visits the manor and is horrified to find Michael's corpse. When Rick gets home, Julia notices that he smells different. Shortly after taking his jacket so she can take it to the cleaners, she finds a pair of panties in its pocket, and it smells like something fierce. The next day, Julia calls Lottie to ask her if the underwear is hers, to which she denies. Lottie asks her if she's feeling guilty about what happened between them and if they should come clean, to which Julia says no. When Lottie offers to find out whose underwear it is, Julia says she'll handle it herself. Miss Julia, girl, you should never trust a trifling hoe. After the call, Lottie checks Rick's schedule and learns that he has scheduled multiple lunches with Andrea. She then sees Rick touching Andrea's hips. This triggers Lottie so hard, the directors show a boiling pot of water to convey that. The next day, Michael heads out to pick up his jacket from the cleaners, and Lottie follows him. On the phone, the girl he had an affair with tells him that she had put a pair of panties in his jacket pocket. He tells her that it's not there, and he'll figure something out. When he returns to his car, he finds a note on his windshield saying, "I know what you did." At home, Julia confronts Rick about the panties and asks if they're Lottie's, to which he denies. When she talks about honesty, Rick confronts her about Lottie, and she confirms that they did eat each other out. The next day, Rick shares with Steve that he has a stalker, and Steve advises him to arm himself just in case. Rick returns home with his new gun and hides it in a drawer. He then informs Julia, who doesn't approve of it. When he apologizes about his affair, Julia tells him that she'll leave town for a few days. When Rick suggests doing couples therapy when she gets back, she tearfully tells him that they're way past that. The next day at the office, Andrea tries to ask him to rail her in, but since his marriage is crumbling, he passes on the offer. When Lottie notices Rick talking on the phone, she listens in and hears him asking Andrea to fire Lottie and find a replacement. They also set a dinner date that night. With Julia gone, Rick and Andrea have their dinner date at Rick's house. And while they're kissing, Lottie arrives. Lottie angrily shares that she has finally found the unconditional love a family can give in Rick and Julia, but they ruined it. She beats Rick with a fireplace poker and threatens to kill Andrea if he fights back. As the frightened Andrea hesitantly follows Lottie's orders to strip, Lottie heats the poker and spanks her ass with it. Rick tells her that it was a one-night stand, but Lottie said it meant everything to her. Julia calls Rick's phone but is alarmed when Lottie answers. When Lottie looks away, Rick punches her so hard she ends up in a new zip code. Then he rushes to get his gun. Hearing the noise, Julia calls 911 and asks to send cops to their house. Lottie recovers and follows Rick, who points his gun at her. Andrea appears a few meters behind Lottie, and then a gunshot echoes throughout the house. Julia returns home and finds the cops apprehending Rick and putting Andrea's corpse in a body bag. Sometime later, Lottie purchases the Bordeaux Manor as Charlotte Bordeaux, and Amy promises to honor her request that she keeps it a secret. After Amy leaves, Lottie enters the house and is shocked to find the real Charlotte, who greets her. When the confused Lottie brings up Michael drowning her, Charlotte tells her that Michael will never hurt her because he was her brother. She adds that she has returned because she felt that Michael's death wasn't an accident. Seeing Lottie in tears, Charlotte hugs her and tells her that everything is going to be fine. To Lottie's horror, Charlotte calls her Charlotte, and then Lottie's screams echo the manor as Charlotte repeatedly stabs the trifling hoe.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.